everyone, welcome back to a new video. My name's Gemma and me and my fiancé James run a reselling business called House of Jamz. We sell vintage and luxury items. So in this week's video I thought I would share some of the new stock that we have just bought. So in our last video I kind of mentioned some of the items that we'd sold, what we sold them for and things like that, and I know in previous videos we've talked about brands that sell well for us and brands that we probably wouldn't buy again, that we'd avoid. So I thought we would share what our new stock is going to be for the next little while. So we've actually went ahead and bought two sort of bulk orders, so big sort of wholesale bundles of two particular items, and I'll kind of talk a little bit later on in the video about why we've chosen to do that. So we've actually bought a bulk order of 60 vintage Coach purses and wallets, and then we've also bought a smaller bundle but still a good bundle, so 25 vintage Gucci wallets. So that is going to be that's going to make up the biggest part of our new stock that we're going to have in our store in the next little while. So the reason that we decided to go down this route is that, especially with Coach, I don't actually think a lot of people realise how good quality vintage Coach items actually are. So after us buying a few of these pieces, you really look at the items, you really do notice, how good the leather is, how beautiful the colours are as well, especially the colour of the leather. It's a nice kind of rich brown a lot of the time, and even just the thickness of the canvas and the patterns on the canvas and things. Yeah, just really, really good pieces. And I think as well, a lot of people don't maybe realise, because it's not like a top, sort of vintage luxury brand, but it is really good quality. Actually, funnily enough, I was just dropping off James at his gig about an hour ago, and as I was sitting in the car, I literally seen a girl walking with a vintage, and I could tell it was vintage from the style. It was very Y2K, very early 2000s vintage Coach handbag, with the sort of leather on the end, leather strap, and it was the brown kind of Coach pattern on the canvas. Beautiful bag, and I was thinking, we're definitely going down the right track here. So another reason that we decided to go down the route of purchasing more Coach is that we have actually, I think, sold out of all of our Coach pieces, or nearly enough all of our Coach pieces. So we have one Coach handbag left, like a sort of red and leather tote bag, but all of our Coach wallets and purses, we've actually sold all those, and we sold them so quickly. So that was another little sign, that Coach was a good brand. Didn't actually realise until I did a little bit of research. Obviously, we know that they're made in the US, they're US made, but a lot of their older pieces, especially from the 80s and 90s, are actually handmade, which I didn't know that. And then another couple of reasons is they're very durable. You can even feel it, when you do, especially the handbag that we've got, with the leather on the corners and around the outside, and then how, as I said, how thick the canvas is. You can definitely feel that that's going to be a bag that's not really going to rip. It's going to last you for quite a long period of time, so definitely very durable. And as I said before, because they sold really quickly, definitely high resale, potential. Again, think about the pricing. And that's something that we did sort of take a little while to kind of get right, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about how much we paid for our Coach wallets, as well as how much we plan on reselling them for. So another thing I wanted to mention as well is that you may have noticed that on our website, if you have checked out our website, I'll just kind of pop it here so you can go and have a look. We do have a lot of, vintage accessories, and we do have a mixture of things like purses, wallets and handbags. This time, when we've been purchasing our new stock, we have decided to go for just wallets and purses. So we've not bought any more new handbags, even though we've sold handbags and things like that. However, I do feel like there's a few good reasons to think about going down the sort of smaller leather goods or smaller items like route. And obviously one of the things is they're easier to photograph, they're easier to sort of turn around, like so when you get them in, you photograph them, you get them listed, you get, you add your description, everything's so much easier because they're not as big items, there's not as many features on them as handbags, so they're easier to do all that with. Another thing is that they're much easier to ship. So obviously you can put them in a smaller box or a smaller bag and things. They're easier to package up. They're easier to kind of just get sent off quickly. You're not having to, maybe check as many things or, put as much protective packaging around it and stuff like that. So much easier to ship. And obviously, they're not cheaper to ship. I'm pretty sure when we do sell them on the likes of Vinted, we do pick the same postage option than we do for a handbag, which is a little bit annoying because obviously a purse and a wallet is a lot smaller than a handbag, but you know, that's obviously something to do with the parcel sizes and things like that. But yeah, so shipping's definitely easier. And also found that wallets and purses and things are just better sellers year round. I feel like you can sell, you know, a handbag, you know, that's more of a sort of investment piece, if you know what I mean, because it's bigger, and obviously that's the thing that's going to be matching your outfit as well, because it's worn on the outside, whereas a purse and a wallet is going to be inside a bag, so it doesn't necessarily have to match certain outfits or, you know, styles or anything. They'll appeal to a lot more people is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, and obviously you can sell them all year round, and you can sell them to a variety of different people, so you don't have to worry about sizing. Another thing I wanted to mention about selling wallets and purses is that if you are selling more expensive items and brands, so more like luxury items, for example Gucci ones, they're a really good sort of way for customers to get a little bit of luxury, but without having to pay a massive price tag. So that's sort of like entry level items. So they maybe want something Gucci, but maybe a handbag is just a little bit of a stretch, but a wallet or a purse is a lot more affordable. So, or again, sort of appeals to a wider range of customers. As I mentioned before, we bought these Coach and Gucci wallets and purses as a wholesale bundle. So this is one of the reasons how we managed to get a lot of our pieces so cheap, because we're not buying individual items, we're buying, you know, in bulk, which means that we can end up paying, you know, less than £10 for, you know, per item, which obviously is really, really good for us. However, I want to point out there are some risks with doing this strategy. So even though, you know, different websites, wholesale websites that you go onto, though, you know, they are pretty transparent with like the photographs and the videos and things, you can really zoom in, you can really scrutinise and see, you know, what's exactly in your bundle. And the photographs for the website that we use, they do show you the exact photos of what you're getting. It's not one of those, oh, you may get items like this in this bundle. It's photographs of the exact items, which is great. And you are going to be getting a lot of good items, you know, good brands and things like that, but inevitably there are going to be a few that are probably going to be a bit slower to sell. They're maybe a weird colour that people don't want, or maybe even if it's a mixed bundle that's got a mixture of brands, you might end up getting a couple of brands that you've never heard of before, and you know, they're not very good sellers, but you might get some nice surprises, because that actually happened to us with our last bundle of handbags that we got. In our last video I mentioned like a Samantha Vega brand I'd never heard of before, but she actually does really cute and unique bags. It's a Japanese brand. They do sort of collaborations with Sailor Moon and things, so you might end up coming across some new brands you've never heard of before. Also mentioned in another video this brand, so definitely keep an eye out for this if you are looking for vintage handbags, a brand called Aigner. I'll put it up on the screen so you can check the spelling. It's a German luxury leather brand, and they do some gorgeous handbags from like the 80s and 90s that are amazing quality, and we managed to sell, you know, you definitely get, I would say, £40 to £50. Again, they're not luxury, like they're not a brand but they're that a lot of people maybe have heard of, but their styles are very clearly vintage. So like when people see them, they know it's a vintage bag. And the leather, as I said, is such good quality. The bags are such good quality. They're so sturdy. They're great. And so I feel like if you do see a brand like that, which is a brand that's brand new to us, definitely grab anything from there, because they are just, you know, they're such amazing bags. So, but yeah, going back to what I was saying, that is a bit of a risk when you are buying wholesale, is you don't always know exactly what is going to be in your bundle of things that you get. Another thing to keep an eye out for as well when you are buying wholesale is the condition of a lot of the items. So obviously in the pictures they can't show you really every single item inside out, you know, the back of it, the underneath, all that kind of stuff. So there may be a few items that maybe need a little bit of care when you get them, so you might need to give them a bit of a, you know, a deeper clean, more than just a bit of a wipe down. You might even need to maybe do a couple of little repairs, or even just be aware that there is going to be, you know, damages to a couple of them. They do obviously say in the listings that we've been looking at, they will say what condition they're in, so there's no surprises. We know that they're all used and things like that, and there might be, you know, signs of wear on the corners and things, and that's fine for us. However, I've actually found the website that we do use, they are over cautious with their condition. So they'll actually say, oh, these items are really well used, you know, there might be a little bit of damage and things like that. And we've actually been pleasantly surprised with everything that we've gotten. So yeah, there's only really been maybe 1 or 2 pieces that have actually had, I would say, any damage to them and that you can't change. So yeah, so we've actually been pleasantly surprised. So another thing to keep in mind, especially if you are buying wholesale, is about the authenticity of things. Now, the wholesalers that we use, we know for a fact they're real, so we don't really need to worry about that kind of thing. But if you are using a website or a new wholesaler, or even if you're out sort of looking in sort of say charity shops and things like that, a couple of things to look at, especially with Coach, just to sort of check that it's authentic, is a lot of Coach bags, especially handbags, have this big leather tag on the inside. I'll show you a picture if I can find a picture of the one on our Coach bag, and it's got a serial number on it. So things like that, look out for. The zips and things as well. Look at the stitching to make sure the stitching's nice and consistent and neat. It's not like a thin, rubbishy thread, you know, like it's good quality. Like especially on Coach, when you're sewing together leather and canvas, it should be a really thick stitch and, you know, a thick thread. So things like that are what you're kind of looking out for, if you're just to sort of check the authenticity. Same with Gucci. A lot of Gucci bags and purses will have, you know, obviously the Gucci logo or the Gucci brand name printed on the inside. I don't think they don't have like a leather label or anything, it's more just printed. Again, looking at the zips. Again, not all pieces though have branded zips, but that's another thing, an extra thing, that if you do have that, that sort of helps prove that it's authentic. And again, Gucci with the stitching and things like that, just making sure that the stitch size is consistent, it's not all wonky, it's not squint, it's not coming undone, things like that, and that it's, you know, good quality stitching. So a few little things that you might do if you do get some vintage pieces in and they are looking a little bit tired, then maybe did a little bit of a spruce. So usually with purses and things, especially if they're leather, you can definitely give them a wipe down. Even just a wipe down with water will help kind of brighten the leather, will brighten, you know, sort of if there's any sort of dust or anything on them, things like that. Definitely going into the, you know, the coin compartment and just making sure that right in the seams there's not like dust or anything like that, or any fluff, things like that, you know, clean all that out. And then another thing that you could do is obviously give the zips a little bit of a wipe and things, and just to brighten them up a little bit, again, just making sure they're not dull looking. And honestly, those little things make such a difference, especially for photographs, because it's just, you know, makes them look a lot newer and just makes them look, you know, really shows off the items that you've got. So now on to the interesting bit where we talk about pricing. So we actually bought, as I said, a whole bundle of 60 Coach wallets. So again, this is why you end up kind of getting a lot of things a lot cheaper, because you could buy them in bulk. So we worked out, because we obviously have to think about delivery and customs and things like that, because they are coming from overseas. So I think we worked out that per wallet, we probably paid, I've actually got my calculator and I've forgotten what it was, roughly £7.84 per wallet. And then looking at some of the styles of the wallets, as I said, there's quite different styles. There's longer ones, longer purses, and then there's a littler square ones. Obviously, probably got a bit more for the longer ones. So we were selling them on our store, I would probably say about £40. That's kind of on average we were selling them for. But depending on the style, if there's ones that are a bit more unique, I found that the lighter coloured leather, so the white or the cream leather, tends to sell, you can tend to get a bit more money for those. Like we actually sold a little square purse that was a white cream leather. Oh, it was so cute, it was beautiful, and we actually sold that one for over £40, and it was a smaller one. So I feel like if that had been a longer wallet, we probably would have gotten even more for that. So definitely feel like the lighter, creamier colours, especially coming into spring and summer, are probably going to sell for a bit more money, and then the sort of browns, blacks and things like that are probably going to be closer to the £40 mark. So we're kind of hoping that we'll probably make about between £40 and maybe £60 per wallet, depending on the style, depending on the material and things like that. A lot of the ones that we sold were canvas and leather, but there are some here that are just leather. So obviously ones that are full leather are going to be worth a little bit more money. There are also a few that are very Y2K, very 2000s with big buckles and things on them, like really Y2K Coach to early 2000s Coach style, and I feel like those ones will also sell quite well because obviously the demand for Y2K 2000 things is pretty high. So yes, I think on average we'll probably make about £40 to £60 per wallet. So just to work that out, what the potential profit would be for that. So overall, if we take into account that we're only paying £7 odds for a wallet, and even if I'm being quite conservative and saying maybe getting £40 for a wallet, which is what we have sold other ones for, and I do think there are some that are probably worth more than that, but this is me being very, as I said, conservative. So selling each one for £40, we could actually make £1,929 profit off of this bundle. So definitely a really good potential there. So I'm really excited for that. So I'm hoping we're right. But I definitely feel like, you know, we have been quite, I'm hoping, quite clever with what we've decided to do with buying quite a lot of Coach. We've based this on, you know, what's worked well for us, what's sold well for us, and the fact that all our Coach items sold really quickly, you know, the smaller Coach items. So we haven't just plucked this out of thin air, we've actually used, you know, information from our previous sales to kind of help. So I am hoping it pans out well. Gucci wallets, we have 25 of those. So this is a bit more of a, we have sold, you know, a few Gucci pieces and they've actually sold really well. So again, this is kind of based on what we've experienced with our store. However, we haven't sold wallets before. So I'm kind of hoping that with them being, you know, slightly more of a newer item, it'll be interesting to see how they perform. But again, all of these ones are either leather or they're canvas and leather. So again, really good quality materials and things like that. So fingers crossed those will perform well as well. So now thinking about our Gucci wallets, as I said, I'm not as certain price-wise. Obviously, Gucci is a bit more of a higher end brand than Coach. So wallets wise, we're thinking, I would probably say maybe about the same-ish kind of price, maybe between £40, maybe between 40 and 80, depending on the style and things like that, just from our little bit of research that we've done. Again, if there are some really unique pieces, maybe even get closer to the £100 mark. And obviously it depends on the materials and things as well. There is a lot, as I said, of canvas, a lot of leather and things like that. So yeah, I think the Gucci wallets might take a little bit more research just because they're a little bit of a newer item to us. But definitely excited to try them out. So one thing that I am kind of predicting a little bit is, even though we have bought Gucci wallets where I want to try those out, I do kind of predict a little bit that I still think our Coach purses and wallets will sell quicker and will sell better than our Gucci ones. Just because I feel like Coach is very, as I mentioned before, is very Y2K, very 2000s. As I said when I mentioned about seeing a girl like out walking with a definitely vintage Y2K Coach handbag, I just feel like there's more of a demand for those. So that's something maybe to keep in mind as well. Like maybe, you know, even though there is a higher end brand like Gucci, it might be better sometimes going for the more sort of affordable brand, because that's the more popular brand, it'll sell quicker and overall you'll maybe make your money back quicker. So that is my little prediction for what we have bought in. However, we still want to try out the Gucci wallets and things like that. I think it's good to have a mixture of like kind of lower ticket items that are more affordable, that will go quicker, and then some maybe higher ticket items that you're going to get more money for, but they'll maybe sell a little bit slower. But when you do make that sale, you're making a lot more money. So working it out for our Gucci wallets, we paid £9.30. Actually, no, let me just work it out. Sorry, I've not put on the postage or anything. So paid about £11 per wallet, which makes sense. They're a little bit more than the Coach ones because they are obviously a higher end brand and things like that. And obviously, as I mentioned, we are actually expecting to sell them for a bit more. So even if we were to sell them, say, a little bit more than the Coach, let me just work out what our potential profit could be for these ones. So I've actually had to put our light on because it's starting to get dark now. So working out that we had 25 wallets, we paid about £11 per wallet. And this time I kind of thought if we're going to be a bit conservative and we were selling each wallet for about £45, with it being Gucci minimum, obviously I do think we'll sell a lot of them for more than that, then selling them at £45 would actually make a profit altogether of £844. So again, really good profit. And as I said, that's a profit. That's not, you know, how much we would just earn. That's taken off what we would have spent on each wallet. So again, really good profit. So if you'd like to see when we do receive these new items, what they're like, what their condition is like, what kind of styles we get and everything like that. Make sure and hit the notification bell so you don't miss that future video. So I've always been quite curious to know, especially when it comes to vintage pieces that are really unique. You obviously get pieces that are more classic colours and things like that, like black and brown and, you know, neutral colours and things, and obviously more unique colourful pieces. So let me know in the comment below, which do you prefer? Do you prefer the more colourful unique pieces or the more sort of statement wearable pieces? So if you found this video useful, make sure and hit the subscribe button. And as I said before, if you don't want to miss our future videos, especially when we do receive our new stock items, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss that, and I'll see you in our next one.